Okay, so now we're ready to start blending our words, sounding them out. Now this is a really important step and I want to model it for you, how you should do it with your child. If you do follow these steps and you practice it with them over and over and over, then when they get further down the road, it should be like clockwork, all the way up until when they're sounding out really big words like alligator. If they learn it correctly, how to sound out words, then when they get to massive, big words, it will not be daunting. It will not be difficult. They will know how to break up those words. So I encourage you in this very crucial first step that you teach it slowly with lots of practice, a lot of modeling. Don't expect that if you show it to them 1 or 2 times that they're going to be able to do it easily. They won't. Most kids won't. Some kids will surprise you and you'll just be like, oh, yay, my darling. That's great when they can do that, okay? But a lot of kids need lots. They need to actually hear your voice in their ear, saying these sounds, breaking apart the word, putting it back together. And I have another tool that I want to show you for kiddos that have a hard time hearing it. So when they sound it out, if they have a hard time putting it together, I have a tool called a whisper phone I want to show you. You can find them on Amazon or you can make them yourself out of a simple PVC pipe. So give me 1 second and I will show you what that looks like. Okay, so here's my whisper phone. You can make this out of a PVC pipe, so it doesn't have to be super expensive, but it is awesome for when you put it up to your ear. Oh, there's my ear. And you talk into here. You actually, I can't talk too loud. When I talk into here, that sound goes right to my ear. So as I'm learning to sound out words and I'm saying k, a, t, I can hear right into my ear, which is perfect for kiddos that might need a little bit extra. They have a hard time hearing themselves. It's more common than you think. Using a whisper phone really helps with this first step because what they're doing in this step I'm about to show you is they're sounding out each letter and putting it together into a word, cat, okay? K, a, t, and they hear all those and then all of a sudden they put them together, cat, and the light clicks on cat because they heard themselves. They sounded out each letter, they recognized what that sound was, and they said it. So they really need their ear to do this first step. Now later on down the road, that will not be the case. They'll be reading in their head, but they'll only be able to read in their head because they've learned how to sound out those words. They know what they're supposed to do when you put them together, but that is a step far down the road. So grab yourself a whisper phone if your child needs one to help them. If you don't have one, they'll need your voice sitting right next to you or you right next to them, sounding out these words, not obviously right in their ear, but right close to them so they can hear nice and clearly as you're beginning to model these sounds. So let me show you what it looks like and how to blend words all together. Here we go. All right, so here is the process that we go through when we sound out words. So I have the word here and the kid starts with this. And the truth is I say it with them in the beginning so that they get used to the pattern of how to do this. At, at, mat. Do you see that? Now I'm going to have my daughter read it with me. You'll hear her voice. Are you ready, dear? Mm-hmm. Ready?
K, a, t, cat, cat.
All right, now let's go for another one. Now you notice how I'm not changing these ones right now because we're just beginning. We're actually just focusing on this beginning sound. We're not going to change it up too much in the beginning. Are you ready, my dear? Mm-hmm. All right, ready?
At, rat,
Rat. All right, nice job. Okay, let's do one more before we make it harder. You ready? Here we go.
at,
At. sat. Nice. Now we're going to make it a little bit harder. So you might do those, and then at another point, you might change the ending. And usually I will have them practice this first. Ready? Ag. Ag. Now, what if we did this sound in the beginning? Ready? R, ag, rag. Rag. Let's do one more. Ag. Sag. Sag. Now, I'm going to tell you right here that some kids, when they're first starting, actually most kids, when they're first starting, it is difficult to put it all together. To actually, they can break it apart, s, a, g, but the putting together is very difficult. So I make it very pronounced, just like I did with the beginning, middle, and ending sounds. So I'm going to model for you. Ready? S, a, g. Ag. Sag. If you do it that slow for them in the very beginning, where they are breaking each word apart and then putting it all together into one. It's the pointing under each letter and then drawing your finger, okay? If that step is still too difficult for them, then you can break it down one step further. You can go s, a, g, s, a. Now let's do the whole thing. Sag. Sag. And they will oftentimes be able to hear that. Now, this step where you just do these two and then the whole one, you don't necessarily have to do with every child. But if when you first start teaching them to sound out these words and putting the going s, ag, sag, sag, and they have a hard time getting that, then you know for a little while, go ahead and break it up and do those first two. Let me do a different one so you don't get too bored here. Let's do ran, okay? A, n. An. All together, ran. All right, let's talk about what we just did. Okay, so what I just showed you was how you teach your child to blend. Now, this is something you're gonna do with them over and over and over again. Kind of like a robot, but you want them to get to the point where they can go rag. Now, they're not gonna be ready for that quick jump. They need the ag, rag. They need the 30 steps for quite a while. Okay, but when they're ready, and you'll know because they'll just start doing it themselves. They won't need that slow one in the middle. They'll just, all of a sudden, it'll click, they'll hear themselves, and boom, out it comes. So you'll see, because you'll be listening to them. Now, eventually, what they do is they go ag, rag, ship. Any word that you give them. Now, ship is really for first grade, okay? But that's the goal that you're heading for. Those types of words, truck, that smoothly. And here's why. When they get to a word that they don't know, which I just gave you a couple of bigger ones on purpose, you want them to be able to sound it out and put it together, not bumble through it, not try to and then not really have a clue how to put it together. So you want it to be repetitious. You want it to be smooth. Truck. See? So that's what you're aiming for. And there will be times when your kiddo will want to cut corners. Don't let them do it. Keep them with that rhythm of sounding out the word and putting it together. Sometimes they'll want to skip sounding out altogether and just try to attack it any way they can. That usually doesn't end well. So I encourage my students, my kids, and the ones that I teach, the ones I tutor, if they start struggling with the word, I say, sound it out. Do it how I taught you. They go back to it, boom, they get it every time. So work on this pattern of at, mat, dog, dog. That's your end result. Don't jump to that until that middle step of dog, the slower one, and then put it together quicker. But that you will see when they reach that point where they sound out the individual letters, they will skip that middle step because they hear it and they go right to that third step. And that is okay and that is good. That's what you're headed for. But know that that middle step takes a certain amount of time and it's different for every kid. Some kids do that middle one for a short period of time and they're off running. Other kids need it for a long time. So don't rush them through it. Let them do it as long as they need. And if they're falling apart, putting it together, say they sounded out at, mta, you know that they need to go back to that middle step. Let's sound it out again. And you do it in their ear with them. At, mat, mat. So I'm going to say that one more time. If you see that they sound out the sounds and they put it together fast, incorrectly, and that happens on a consistent basis, like I'm going to say 10% or more of the time, take them back and have them do that middle step of sounding it out slowly and then putting it all together. So I hope that is helpful in teaching you how to blend with your child. Now I'm going to warn you, there are some kids that when you start sounding out words that they will quickly want to revert to doing it in their head. I don't advise that for kindergartners. And here's why. When they're first in these beginning stages of learning how to read, learning how to put their letters together, they very often make mistakes that they're not aware that they're making. If you can't hear the mistake, you can't fix the mistake. So I have had a couple of my kiddos that grumbled and rumbled over me saying, I need to hear you. Say it out loud so I can hear you. I found the best method for that was teaching them why it's important. And so you can tell them this, just like I told you, if you read in your head and you're making a mistake, I don't know what you're doing wrong, so I don't know how to help you. Now, this is okay. This works for some kids. Some kids, it still doesn't work for. Some kids still, I don't want to do it in my head. I don't want to do it out loud. I want to do it in my head. I'm going to leave that one to you to learn to decide how you want to deal with that. With my kids, it wasn't an option. I would generally show them what I wanted them to do, explain it to them, so hopefully it would make sense to them for why we were doing what we were doing. If they still don't want to cooperate, well then I pulled the trump card. I'm the teacher, I'm the mom, and this is what you need to do so that I can teach you. That is necessary at some times. And so I wouldn't let them, I don't advise them doing it in their head. So that's the reason why I don't do that all for first grade. Kindergarten, and mostly for first grade. They're still learning all the foundational skills, the sounds, really all the way through second grade. They're learning all of their sounds, and each year they learn more and more sounds all the way through to the end of second grade. Not only do you need to be able to hear what mistakes they're making, reading out loud is a very important skill, okay? Oral reading, pronunciation, recognition of periods, and then when you talk to them about their reading and what did they read and what did they understand and what happened first, what happened next, what happened last, all of those comprehension questions, what do you think will happen next, the inferencing, all of those that I'm going to get into a little bit later are super important. And you need that in those beginning years, them reading out loud to practice that oral skill. So I encourage you to let them do it out loud. Now, that being said, there are times, and I'm going to use my youngest son as an example. He went through this stage where when he was reading, he would start to get really uptight and tense. And he's already learned how to read, for the most part, we're at the end of second grade reading, and he's basically reading chapter books, but he was getting really uptight and starting to breathe a lot. And I'd say, are you struggling to read? No, I love reading. And he's a good reader, but why was he struggling? So what I did was I would say to him, because I knew that he knew his sounds, all the sounds, he was not struggling as far as sounding out his words. None of that is an issue for him. He recognizes his punctuation. That is not an issue. So the only thing I am working with him on is fluency, reading smoothly across the page. So because that is the only thing I'm working on, what I told him he could do was he could read it the first time in his head. So I'd say, all right, Gabe, go read your book. You can read it in your head, and later you can read it to me. That helped him to be able to work through the story the first time. So by the time he came to me, it was his second time through. And fluency, you gain fluency by repeatedly reading the same thing. So he would read a story to himself, and then he came and read it to me. Now that might sound boring to you, but it actually gave him confidence. Oh, look how good I'm reading, because he was not struggling through anything. He read it smoothly, gaining more fluency, expression as he read. He already had an idea of what the story was about because he'd read it one time through. So then when we're reading together, he's reading smoother. He's stopping at those periods. He understood what was happening. We could do the comprehension together. That is an okay time to let them do it in their head because they already know their sounds. They can already sound out all of their words without a lot of errors. So I don't really need to do a lot of correcting there, actually none. So that is the only time I let my students read in their head, and I would encourage you to do the same. So with that, we'll move on.